Yeah, good evening, everyone. I actually had prepared to speak in German tonight, but the translators are on a strike, so my understanding is that there won't be a translation on the web stream. So we will have translation in this room, but not on the live feed. So I will speak English so that everyone knows what we are talking about here. Anyway, it's a great pleasure to see all of you here because it is a very serious issue, what we're about to discuss, and we called it post-VAC flight risks. And as you may have read in the media these past couple of days or the weeks before, there is chaos pretty much on every major airport or all airports throughout Europe. There is, piles and piles of suitcases. The passengers are standing in line for hours and hours, no end at check-in. And of course, you all heard about thousands and thousands of canceled flights. The official narrative, what might be the reason for this is, well, because of the lockdown, we had to lay off so many people and we cannot just hire them back. That is the official narrative. Of course, there could be other reasons for this, but I heard that there is translation on the web stream. Well, too bad I started in English, now I will finish in English. So anyway, there could be other reasons for these problems, but these reasons they're not eager to even mention them, because if they did, it might turn out that their entire lie, the building of their lies may just tumble down and will break into shatters. And they went to great length to erect this building of lies, manipulation, gaslighting. You had people were being repressed. They have been forced, basically been told they will stand to lose their jobs if they don't go along with whatever the government asks them to do. If you look at this chaos, what we are looking at right now, it goes way beyond the annoyance of, missing your suitcase or having to stand in a line, because what we are actually talking about is it could cost a lot of people their lives, because we're talking actually about a safe flight, which may no longer be the case. Because what happened was that a lot of pilots that did not want to get vaccinated had been laid off. And the ones that did get vaccinated, because they had families to feed, a mortgage to pay, all of these things to take care of, may now no longer be fit to fly. And that is a problem, and to the globalist elites, it must be a shocker. Can you imagine? First, people are being forced to get a vaccination to only then find out that it might actually be the dumbest thing they ever did. But I don't want to say too much about this, because we have people here today that know far better than me what actually went on. And it is actually a great honor, and I would like you to join me into welcoming, first of all, we have Madame Prota. She is an attorney at law from France. Then we have Mr. Philippe Kruse, attorney at law from Switzerland. We have Mrs. Chantal Biolay. She is a pilot. And we have Mrs. Letizia Howard. She is a flight attendant. And it is really a great pleasure having all of you here. And I will have to say, you are very brave people, because that's actually, bravery is actually what it takes. Courage is what it takes to, stand in the way of the globalist elites, because they're unscrupulous and they will do whatever they can. So it's a great honor to have you here. And I'm pretty sure this vaccine campaign, it will go down as the biggest scandal in medical history. And moreover, it will be known as the biggest crime ever committed on humanity. That is actually what we're talking about, ladies and gentlemen. But that's enough from me. Before I now entrust you into the very capable hands of our experts tonight, I would like to introduce to you my colleague, Virginie Geron, a French deputy. She is also very brave, and we have been fighting right alongside of each other this COVID madness in this house and everywhere else. And I would like to give her the floor. So she has a few things to say to you too. Thank you.
Alors, pardonnez-moi.
I hope you don't mind me speaking French, because this is such a technical issue that I prefer resorting to my mother tongue. Thank you, Christina, for this initiative, because this is something very important. We've been working on this issue for quite some time, and I'm delighted to see you here with us, because as parliamentarians, we are dealing with legislation, regulations, and then there's reality. And what we need is your input. That's why it's so great here, where we crank out legislation, where we ask for studies, and we don't have a basis to go on, and we go on passing legislation. So it's great to be here with you. When it comes to the parliamentary work, it's very important to focus on what it just is, and that way you will better understand how can we use what you contribute, and then we can see how we can change mentalities, change the way the members vote. I'd just like to give you a bit of background, because in fact today the consequences of the adoption of legislation that didn't entail any legislation. We saw that with the COVID pass. We saw how that was renewed, and these legal instruments, these tools obliging people to get vaccinated. And as we see, when it comes to the figures, I'd like to give you a good example of what happens in France. Once the European COVID pass was adopted, now it's being adopted in Paris as we speak. And there's some criticism to what its impact was. Did the COVID pass eradicate the virus? Did it stop contamination? No, but it means that you will not be seriously ill. So the COVID pass that we have in France is just something to force you to get vaccinated, but it's totally inappropriate. I mean, when it comes to the medical implications, I'll leave that to doctors and scientists. But to finish, we were the first to talk about side effects. And we did that last year by suggesting a resolution, because we knew that the issue is, if there are side effects, who is accountable? And seeing how the way the Commission deal with this, it's not the labs that are going to be footing the bill for any side effects. But since it's the European Commission that was in charge of the negotiations, we asked for the setup for a fund for victims. 30 seconds is how long it took. It didn't even make it into the our committee. And we had a number of members, a number of them who are here, who co-signed this regulation, and we tabled it again because now that we see the figures from EMA as regards the side effects, I mean, they're going through the ceiling. And and this is my final point, we don't have any feedback as to what became of our resolution. So just to tell you what's up in our committee, and thank you ever so much for being here with you.
Okay, wir haben hier noch einen kleinen.
So let's get reorganized here so everyone can give their presentation in the best conditions. So, Philip, I take it you're going to take over? No? No, Chantal is going to take over. And here we go. Yes, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chantal Biolay. I'm a captain in a large airline in Europe. I'm speaking on behalf of Airliners for Humanity, Switzerland, Germany, and Austria, and I'm here because I'm worried about flight safety. What do you expect from the people who are in the cockpit when you're sitting in a plane as a passenger? You certainly expect pilots to be fit and that everything is 100% safe. Aviation safety over the past 100 years has constantly been improved. We learn through mistakes, through crashes, to see to it that the same errors don't happen twice. So we have a host of, a whole system of regulators and rules, and that's appropriate because that's why flying is as safe as it is nowadays. But now there's a new type of medicinal approach that's been introduced, which also affects aviation. And it isn't even clear what it has to be declared as. When it comes to COVID-19 vaccines, is that a vaccine or is this gene therapy? Here, people haven't sorted that out yet. The experts haven't sorted that out yet. What would be the requirements to the control authorities before the use of a new technology for aviation? And have there been any research in that? In aviation, where the number one rule is safety first, can you use substances of that kind? Is that appropriate? Is aviation still on the same level of safety as it was before the introduction of COVID-19 vaccines? We pilots are the ones who are responsible for the crew, for the aircraft, and the passengers sitting on board. We are responsible for you. And in aviation, can these new methodologies be used when they might be jeopardizing flight safety? Let's have a look at the official data banks and see how these new methodologies have done. Let's begin by saying that the original figures have to be checked. We are only going to show a ratio. Look at the U.S. database. This shows all of the suspect deaths following vaccination. And you can see that over the past few years, it was dead quiet. It's only as a result of the COVID-19 vaccines that you can see the way the thing took off. And we looked at all the data that it's on the basis of per million, and this way we can compare. When it comes to influenza vaccines, there were 59 cases. Let's get the slide, get the right slide up here. These vaccine adverse events. So one further, please. So since 1990, there was 59 vaccine adverse events reported with COVID-19. 24 times higher than that. When it comes to the suspected deaths, 0.4 per million by the influenza vaccines, 21 for the COVID-19 vaccines. That's a growth of 51%. 51 times, rather, excuse me, not 51%. So let's have a look at Emma's figures. The vigilance. And here we looked at all the data, but they're only relevant if we compare them on a per million basis. When it comes to 2007, there were 29 adverse event effects reported for well, this one has gone up by a factor of 49 as a result of COVID vaccines. And there's another well, underreporting isn't taken into account, and the bottom line is that these are the official data that we can't really interpret. That's the job of the competent organizations and also of the airlines. And in the light of these figures, we can't help asking, how can we see to it that aviation will be as safe as it was before the introduction of COVID-19 vaccines? How can we see to it that you can travel as safely as in the past? Can you simply introduce new measures in aviation when they may undermine safety? And who's responsible to make these determinations? Who's in charge or responsible for your safety? But now we're fortunate to have a lawyer.
Thank you very much, Commander Biolay. Mein Name ist Philipp Kruse.
Hi, my name is Philipp Kruse. I have the honour to have been part of Airliners for Humanity for around a year now. I've been representing them for that time. So the decisive point that we have to decide on tonight is who is legally responsible for this and what is happening with the vaccines. So let's look at the situation. Worldwide, various airlines have got a global vaccine obligation for pilots, or are discussing it. There was a presidential decree, and we will hear about that from my colleague later on. Those who say that they're not going to get the vaccine can expect to lose their jobs. Now, staff that stand up against these vaccines, as a general rule, are not against vaccines as such, but rather, as we heard from my colleague, they are concerned about safety. And safety is the central topic here and the main argument. The effects of a COVID-19 vaccine have not been sufficiently researched yet in terms of their safety. In addition to this, when we're talking about flight staff, there are specific environmental conditions that they are subject to, various pressures, different air humidity, and different time differences, of course, and different biorhythms that their bodies are subject to. And so the obligation to be vaccinated goes against flight safety measures, and this is an important factor. There are essentially three pillars of flight safety. The first is the Chicago Agreement. The second is the rule of ICAO, and EU law is the third. All three of these areas regulate the same thing. They cover the same principles. And these principles are, firstly, safety interests. They always come ahead of operational interests and economic interests. Secondly, states are obliged to proactively look at risk management and carry out medical examinations and re-examinations if they believe that new risks have occurred, for example, such as side effects of new vaccine technology. And thirdly, and this is perhaps the most important principle that we're going to be talking about this evening, there is the principle, and this is covered in the Manual of Civil Aviation Medicine. This is document 8984. It's very easy to find, and there it says that new measures have to be taken into the context of health emergencies, and that they can be introduced in civil aviation if they meet the requirements relating to flight safety, and that they don't represent a step back in terms of airline safety. So those are the three main principles. What that means is that there are lots of regulators and lots of airlines that are constantly monitoring the situation proactively, and we have to look at what they need to take into account. They have to ensure that the new substances are only admitted or allowed if they meet certain requirements. Now, here we do not have long-term studies. We've not got long-term studies on the effectiveness or on the safety of the COVID-19 vaccine. We're dealing with a new technology here. In the US, it is classified as gene therapy. And what does that actually mean? Well, it means that the compound that it is producing is kind of created within your body. Your body is the factory for it. So it's new technology. And with this new technology, it's not entirely clear where this substance is produced, for how long it is produced, what quality or what quantity these spike proteins are produced in. It's obviously also not clear, therefore, how people are going to react to this. And so pretty much everything which would usually be defined when we are dealing with medication and medication safety remains unknown. 500 years ago, a Swiss doctor said the dose makes the poison. And what he meant there was that the dosage is what decides whether something's a medicine or a poison. And that is very important. That's the major black box that we've got here. And so this is one of the major points that the regulators and authorization bodies need to be taking into account. So how this affects flight safety in Europe and worldwide also needs to be considered, because there is an increased risk to safety here. We need to ensure that the studies carried out by the manufacturers meet requirements in terms of quality and quantity. And we've just had my colleague run through the figures for you. The regulators also need to look at witness reports. We're going to be hearing some of those today, and so on and so forth. There's a whole series of risk factors that need to be taken into account when it comes to civil aviation regulation. So that means that we've briefly given you an outline of the situation. Here you can see the international bodies responsible for civil aviation around the world, and EASA, of course, the European Aviation Safety Agency. And so now we're going to hear about specifically the chain of safety. So here we've listed all of the various players. On the left you've got the manufacturer, Moderna, Pfizer, BioNTech. Then you've got the European Medicines Agency. And how is it that these different bodies have contributed to recognizing the risks or eliminating the risks? Well, if we start with the manufacturer themselves, in the documentation for the vaccines, they've said that there are that the data is incomplete, particularly here when it comes to absorption, metabolism. So what is going to happen with the product once it's in your body, elimination, how it's removed, and then distribution, how it's distributed around your body. So Pfizer itself, on pretty large areas, has said that more research is required. Then we've got the European Medicines Agency. And here, in the latest communication from them from March, they said that since Spikevax has been given conditional marketing authorization, the company that markets Spikevax will provide final results from the 2 clinical trials, which will continue until the end of 2022. We have, however, heard nothing further from them in terms of those results and their research. And pilots and flight attendants, as I said before, are subject to quite specific environmental conditions, different air pressure levels, for example, and what's most important is that they are the ones responsible for the safety of everybody on board. So then we've got the oversight authorities, here EASA. And we've asked whether EASA has ever carried out its own independent preventive investigations on the use of vaccine in aviation. Essentially, the answer is no. Here we've got communication from the 25th of March 2021. And this can be found on the EASA homepage. On the homepage, you can also find the risks discussed. It says, at this time, no evidence is available in relation to the effect of in-flight conditions or the severity of side effects. And so, essentially, what they're saying is, please see more information and guidelines provided by EASA, WHO, and so on and so forth. Now, this dates back to March 2021. And this is the European Union for Aviation Safety. This is an oversight body. And since March 2021, we have not heard any further from them about risks and statistics in relation to these vaccines. Now, we all know that none of the organisations that write the rules themselves have actually tackled the risks that we are facing nowadays and that we're seeing mentioned in the media on a regular basis. So we've had nothing from ICAO either. And then in Switzerland, we've got the Federal Office for Civil Aviation. We wrote to them too and asked them whether they'd looked at that. Their answer to that was no. They referred to the work done by Swissmedic, which is the authorising body. But they didn't carry out any kind of risk analysis themselves. And the answer was essentially no from them too. So that means we've got to coming to the end of our diagram here, and it's coming down to our pilots, such as my colleague who sat next to me today, who are facing these risks when they go into the cockpit. They know that there are side effects. Next slide, please. And another one, please. And so, essentially here, with all of this safety network, the 80 years of work that have gone into creating this network, with always saying that safety came first and foremost, we have not found anybody who's actually dealing with the question of whether these substances are safe and whether they add to safety in the cockpit or in the plane generally. Now, there's something else which is important to add. Here we've got another very important issue to deal with. And this is for people who work in for airlines. I'd said before that people fear that if they don't take the vaccine, they will lose their jobs. But there are very clear provisions provided here. This is from the WHO. This is the International Health Regulations, Article 57, and it very clearly states in here, it says, the provisions of the IHR shall not affect the rights and obligations of any state party deriving from other international agreements. So it very clearly refers to other agreements. Here specifically we've got the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and here too there's a very important article, Article 7, and again I've underlined it and read the important sentence here. It says, in particular, no one shall be subjected without his free consent to medical or scientific experimentation. So without his free consent, there is the important part. And then in Article 4, and this again is decisive, it says the above applies even in times of public emergency. So even if there's an emergency situation that has been announced, then even if the WHO has announced an international health emergency, then still, even in that situation, these rules apply. So it's written very, very clearly. And this is in incredibly important international standards, international regulations. It makes it clear what the rules are. And so here is the crux of the matter, really. And I have to say I'm delighted to see that there are so many MEPs in the room with us today. Now we'd like to talk to you about what our requests are to you, what the requests of people working in civil aviation are to the members of the European Parliament. Firstly, it is vital that there is a political debate on this, and that the political debate focuses on recognising safety risks and ruling out safety risks. Risks, of course, here I'm talking about in connection with the COVID vaccine. And so I'd like to thank Ms. Christina Anderson very much for having invited us to be here today. That's obviously the first step to starting a debate. So thank you very much. It's a first step, but we need to go further. Next slide. So please try to ensure that EASA provides proof that it can actually rule out the risks of these mRNA vaccines. And can they really say that it's not affecting civil aviation safety? Have they looked at this? Yes or no? That's a really important question that needs to be asked. Then the same is also true for the EMA. There, really, I think we need to ensure that we ask them some critical questions. Where is this produced in the body? For how long is it produced in the body? In what quantity is it produced? And can the EMA actually rule out that there are risks for civil aviation presented by these mRNA vaccines? Here, quite clearly, we need legislation which provides protection and which doesn't have loopholes. We have clear rules about medicinal products being used in the civil aviation industry, and we need to ensure that they're safe. Another point is that there needs to be an immediate stop to any further vaccination of flight personnel with these kinds of mRNA vaccines until all possible risks can be ruled out. So one final request is that we need to stop forcing pilots and people working in civil aviation to be vaccinated. It goes against their human rights, and it is a risk not just to themselves but to all of their passengers. Thank you.
Und damit übergebe ich noch einmal kurz das Wort zurück an.
So, Commander Bioli, the floor is yours again. So who's responsible for flight safety at the end of the day? Basically everyone, but there are major questions that are unanswered. And when it comes to risks, what it is just passing the risks on to the flight crew, because once the doors of the aircraft close, then I'm responsible. But what am I responsible for as a captain, as a being in command, that maybe I see that there hasn't been any risk analysis published, that the public authorities haven't dealt with this, and when flight personnel doesn't want to take this risk and calls the whole thing into question, people are just fired. And we have to see to the safety of the crew, the passengers, your safety, the safety of your children, of your family. That is our job, to see to that, and we are responsible for your safety. And in the giving circumstances, a number of us can't take on the responsibility for this unknown factor. I, who am sitting here before you, I'm risking my dream, my job, my passion, and that's on account of me standing up for your safety. So how do you feel when the pilot no longer feels safe on board?
I just have to comment on this. You are absolutely right about this one. Ooh, how would I feel if the pilot doesn't feel safe? Wow.
Dankeschön.
Thank you. Next, Ian Pocha is from Paris, and he is now, she is now to give her presentation. Thank you ever so much for having invited us along to this conference. Ian Pocha is my name. I'm a barrister in Paris, and I think it's great that I could come along and address this issue of the risks, but also the measures that were taken, and some of them perhaps might bring around some change. Some of them already have. But before going into more detail, we came with a press release, and I'd like to read out the beginning of it, because this is, who are we? Our group got together spontaneously as a result of the French government's decision to lay down a vaccine pass. We stand up for the freedom of choice so that we don't necessarily have to be vaccinated to do our job. As part of our job, we're constantly being monitored, and we want non-invasive tests such as PCR or saliva tests may be paid for by our employers, and that they be accepted, because COVID vaccination started in December 2020, and the World Pharmacovigilance has just a short oversight period to know what the effects of these injections are. As said, the substances are in the clinical phase 3, so they're still under study. And we see that there's a lot of side effects, as the National Medicines Agency in France has noted, and then the English, the UK agency has also reported a number, 170,000 cases, of which 45,000 are serious, and apparently only one person out of 10 reports side effects. So that means that there's more than 1,700,000 people. That's stratospheric. And to say that 45,000 serious, that's 25%. But what is serious? According to the pharmacovigilance, these are effects that means that you're in hospital, that you're unable to work, and that you could end up dying. So 45,000 and potentially multiplied by 10. So that's our first finding. And our organization says there being this obligation for us to get vaccinated, we have found that there's an abnormal number of diseases, whereas there's only 24,000 thrombosis, hormonal dysfunctions, memory loss, fatigue, problems with our heart beat, AVC, strokes, and we have lodged a case between the State Council, and we've also reported all our information to a parliamentary committee, and they've set up a expert group to look into this issue. So this is a common finding, but behind these figures, there's the human reality. As has been mentioned, aviation safety is everyone's basis, and in particular of the flight crew, the flight attendants, and the captains. And when we lodged our first appeal against the COVID pass, we from the outset drew the Supreme Court to the fact that there were all these cases, reported cases of side effects, and the flight crew staff were the ones who had the courage and stood up. And I came here with a flight attendant, and I read that some 70% of the side effects were suffered by women, in particular hormonal dysfunctions, and they're part and parcel of air safety, and they should not be exposed to side effects during flight. So when I read all of these reports, I was very upset. So thank you very much for you to have come along and to tell us what you've been through.
Bonjour, je vous remercie tous de votre...
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here today and talk to you about my experience last year, which was very traumatic to me and very difficult to go through. I'm 43. For 30 years, I had a regular cycle, like clockwork. At 42 years old, for personal reasons, I had a complete workup done by my GP, and they told me I was very far from the menopause, that my health was perfect, and that I was doing well. I had my first vaccination in April. I had a bit of pain and a couple of days of running a temperature, but they told me that might happen. I thought it was fairly normal. Then in August, when I had my second vaccination, a week later, all of a sudden, I bled for 18 days. Now, it was horrendous. I saw chunks coming out of me, big clots, and I know it's not nice to talk about, but I have to say it was a huge amount of blood and tissue, and I was very, very alarmed. I have got a 14-year-old who's very well, and who, you know, I'm lucky I already have a child, but I was told by my doctor that this was something which was completely normal. It happened with the COVID vaccines. My gynecologist confirmed this. I had memory loss. I was unable to speak properly. I was getting trembling feeling throughout my whole body. I was weak. I couldn't stand. I couldn't even dress myself. I was just so weak. It was really incredibly difficult for my family to go through, and I don't want to talk about it for too long, but my children were really, really had to go through a lot. My doctor put me in touch with a psychologist to see whether it was perhaps burnout, but I have to say I don't see the connection between burnout and bleeding for 18 days. But I had a psychological evaluation to see whether I was capable of doing my job. Now, our pilots always say that we're their eyes and ears, and so we also have an important safety role to play on board. If something happens on board, I can't phone 999 and get help to come. It's me that is the emergency service on board, and I've been trained to be able to deal with that. If we've got an attempted terrorist attack, it's me that is there on the front line that stops someone getting to the cockpit. We've got safety and security training, which ensure that we don't have any pieces of suspect baggage left behind, which could create a crash or a safety risk. We also have the obligation to provide help to any passenger in any situation, regardless of what they're going through, whether it's a heart attack or whether they're giving birth. So I need to be in tip-top form when I get on board so that I can react to these situations. I worked for 6 months on only 40% of my salary. I lost all of that money. As a single mum, I wasn't able to keep my house. We had to move. I was given a choice after all of this. Either I got the vaccine, or I was given a choice, at the beginning of all of this. I either take the vaccine or I lose my job. And so obviously I took the vaccine. There was government advice at the time telling me to do that, but it had a hideous impact on my body, mental and physical. It's had an awful impact on my life, on my finances. I have recently gone back to work, but it was really very difficult. And I have to say it is hard to say all of this in front of all of you today, but I think if the flight crew isn't at 100% when they are on board, they're not capable of doing their job. When I started work with the airline, I had to have up-to-date vaccines, including yellow fever. I had all of that. Now that we're being treated as guinea pigs, saying this vaccine only came out 3 months ago, we've not got any research on it, at all, pretty much, but you have to take it, and that it'll stop you getting the disease. It's just wrong. When we were told that we had to bring people back from countries with COVID lockdowns, and we had to repatriate these people, I was given no PPE to run those flights. And you're not a metre, 2 metres away from these people at all. And we had absolutely no protection, whether you're vaccinated or not. But there are hideous side effects that can happen to you. A lot of my colleagues, however, don't want to speak out. They've also suffering enormously. They've not had periods for 9 months. They have had to have their uterus is removed, because they've had such horrible side effects. And so the truth is still something that we can't say. We're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of people who aren't speaking out because us being able to work is based on our health, so people don't want to speak out. The medical centre in our airlines runs regular checkups of us every year and every 2 years. That means if I'm not at 100%, then I can't do my job. Now, I have to go and see the medical service every 4 months. I've effectively been blacklisted. So every 4 months I have my checkup again. And then it's every 3 months for my occupational medicine checkups. So maybe I'll come off this blacklist at some point, but not yet. And at the moment it seems that I have been blacklisted and set aside.
I also came with other cases I'd like to report, because what we've heard now, other flight attendants, other pilots have had the courage to say it in other fora, because there is an omerta, and that's why all of this has to be public, so that we can assess the aviation risk involved. An example, 30 in their 30s, after the first doses, 10 days later, left arm swollen, hot, red. After the second dose, fatigue, but so that I couldn't sleep. Memory loss. Our doctor said that he had other cases like that, and that these side effects could last several weeks or months. Out of breath whenever doing anything, out of work for 10 days. Then I resumed 30 days, and at the end of the day, I couldn't remember my latest flight. The captain asked me whether I was able to do my job. He said that I had gotten a few things wrong, and he put the aircraft on autopilot, because he thought I was just out of it. And I can't do sports. I'm out of breath. As soon as I do anything, I try to pedal on a static bicycle, and I just can't do it. So it's really frightening. And look at the risk we're talking about in terms of aviation safety, and also in terms of the legal implications, because the risk is meant to be 1 in a billion. But when it comes to the side effects, we only know a small bit of the picture, but even that is beyond what is normally acceptable in terms of aviation safety. And when it comes to the European regulations, this 1168 of the 3 November 2011 that lays down the technical requirements and the civil aviation in line with etc. Section 2, to get your license, medical certificates, class 1 and 2. 1, the applicant has to be devoid of any congenital diseases, any all these various. But to make a long story short, the person has to be in perfect health. And so we have this legislation, and that should be the basis, because pilots can't even take an antihistamine without declaring it. So they're on the same basis as pregnant women. And we can see that the side effects at present are not given their due, and there's different kinds. How can you simply say that this COVID-19 vaccination complies with European regulations? And that is the basis for our Association of Flight Crews. And had said we lodged a couple of cases, and when it comes to the Senate's specialized office, and we asked, well, they came up with a report. When it comes to the risk-benefit assessment of the COVID vaccine, and what they said is, yes, there's a need for further research for women and children, and we've said that we should add flight crews to the list, because we usually think side effects, hey, that's probably not going to be me, that's going to be somebody else. But even if we're talking not about an aviation pilot, what about the guy who drives your kid's school bus? So the Parliamentary Office of the Senate has been working on this with our organization. So we're trying to draw the attention of EASA to this and submitting all our information, but also the conclusions of the Senate body. So we're calling for an urgent meeting, and we want to have an urgent meeting with EASA to take account of all the information we have, to see to it that there be a reassessment of the risk-benefit assessment for flight crews, and that they might carry out tests that would not have any side effects. And when it comes to an additional dose in our countries, we ask that flight crews who are already suffering from all of these side effects not be subjected to a further dose, because the bottom line is it's jeopardizing aviation safety. And with all the have done, with all the information, we hope with the EP's backing, EASA will listen to us and issue new guidelines and take account of side effects, and in particular to see to it that we have perfect aviation security. And the way would be using tests which don't have any side effects. I mean, we're talking about young and healthy people who don't need a vaccination, but they do it because they're told that it's to protect their families, their grandparents, and their passengers. And so this is just the thing that everybody has realized now is that the vaccination doesn't stop getting infected. So we don't need it. So why should we get vaccinated? We're in good health, where the risk of vaccine is greater than the risk of catching COVID. So that's our plea.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. The last couple of speeches that we had there really got under your skin.
And I will just say this. I mean, what in God's name have they done with this? It is absolutely, it's actually unbelievable. And what I'm going to say now, I will say to each and every elected representative of the people in every Western democracy, I am asking you, what have you done? You didn't do your job. And do not tell me you didn't know, because anyone could have known. And if you have bothered enough to care about the people, if you had bothered enough to do your job, you should have known. And moreover, it is your damn job to know. It is your job to protect the people that you were elected by and that your job is to represent. Once again, I'm asking, what have you done? Ladies and gentlemen, there is so much coming to light. All of the adverse side effects. There is numerous studies now available on fetal disfigurements. There is genetic defects from babies born to women that got vaccinated. What in the hell is going on here? And I do not, who is the beneficiary of all this? Well, I do know it's the pharmaceutical companies, of course. But once again, we, as the elected representatives, we need to do our jobs. And I'm really glad that there is MEPs here today. And I can only say we will do whatever it takes to bring all of this to light and to make sure that the rights of the people will be protected once again. Thank you. So I would now like to open the floor for questions. Yes.
Well, thank you very much. I want to thank you all for speaking out. I know it's very difficult. You have to be very brave to do this. And I want to thank you for that. We as politicians know what it is to speak out, because they try to cancel you. That's the thing that's going on. But the beautiful thing that you are, as from the aviation sector, are doing that is that in the aviation sector everything is recorded. And there was an example of a bus driver. If a bus driver gets unwell, no one will know. No one will ever know. But that's my first question. Do you see an increase in flight incidents due to pilots becoming unwell during flights, compared to the period before the COVID vaccination? That's my first question, maybe to the commander or to the lawyers. I have also a second question, and that is the 45,000. This is a question to Diane. 45,000. Where is it? Is that France or is it?
Yes, it's France.
And also a third, and then maybe you can combine it, because I'd like to hear that from a lawyer. Is this vaccination stage still in phase 3? It was. I spoke out for that, and they said I was crazy. But it's still in phase. Okay, I have those 3 questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your question. With respect to the last question, phase 3, this is absolutely clear. We can say that there were not even sufficient minimal studies on animals dying, and not even on humans were being done and performed. I'm talking just about the minimal studies that would be necessary to initiate this procedure of this very special conditioned admission. Now, there's not even such a thing as a phase 3 studies properly going on, because that would be required that people would know that they are officially part of an experiment, that would be informed, and that there would be somebody who supervises this experiment. And there's none. As we have heard, maximum 10% of these incidents are being reported. So we are in fact in a situation like phase 3, but we are far away from any proper setup of an experiment as it would usually be done. Now, with respect to the incidents that can be reported within the aviation business, I would like to hand over to Chantal Biolay. Do you know something about that?
No, we don't really have any numbers right now, because it's difficult for us to get access to any numbers regarding in-flight emergencies or in-flight returns. We probably would have to ask ATC, but I'm not sure who could answer that question, to be honest.
Maybe we can help you. We have a COVID committee, special committee on COVID. On COVID, it's called COVID. And we as politicians, we have access to classified data. So if you can give us maybe the source where this data is collected, then maybe we can ask the questions. Thank you very much.
Good point, Rob. Yeah.
If I can answer also about the trouble that may occur while flying, the testimonies that I've been reading to all of you demonstrates that this kind of stuff can happen and that already have happened while flying. The problem is that it's unreported because, as you've seen, the testimony I've been reading, well, in the end, it was the flight attendant who was not remembering his day. It's a colleague who told him about it. So I don't know if there's going to be a report on that. So this is why we are using this testimony to call off your attention, because for sure they exist. And what is for sure is we don't have a drama, and we hope it will never happen, but we have demonstrated that it can happen. And as for the figures, the numbers of side effects, 170,000 are the figures up to date for the French Medical Agency. This is the number of side effects, and 45,000 among them are serious side effects. So this concludes to death, to trouble that lasts over a long time period, and also it causes leave of work. But we have to remember, and this is well known since a decade, that we have only one person, minimum over 10, who report these side effects. Alors, obviously, the scale changes today because we have been vaccinated all the big part of the humanity. So the scale changes, but it's still normal because, as we said, a vaccine must be prophylactic. So it's on people who are otherwise in good health. So it's shocking that we have this tremendous number of side effects for young people, women, etc., who doesn't gain any benefit and who doesn't protect others while taking this vaccine.
Are there any other questions? Kollege Zimniok, bitte.
Danke, Christine.
Thank you, Christina. Firstly, I just wanted to perhaps destroy your hope in politicians a little bit. A lot of my colleagues aren't, this isn't something that they are capable of grappling with, or they hold very different opinions. In a lot of committees, we've heard this. For example, when we're talking about Africa, people have been saying that there are piles of corpses. There is a low percentage of Africans that are vaccinated, and a lot of them don't want to be vaccinated. My colleagues wanted us to send 1.5 trillion to Africa to try and make people aware of how dangerous COVID-19 is, so to go out and kind of do the propaganda. But what we've set up in Africa now isn't managing to sell any vaccines, and so it's shutting up shop. As far as I know, if I get a vaccine, that vaccine usually is voluntary. And if it's voluntary, then it's one thing. But here we're talking about clear obligation that is being talked about. For example, if you want to teach in Germany, you have to have your vaccinations. And then if something happens, then they say it's your own fault somehow. But if you are a pilot, or you drive an HGV or whatever it might be, then obviously you can present a risk to other people as well. And I think these are things that we need to look at, but which my colleagues have got no interest in looking at whatsoever. Now, I think it's probably, you'll be the ones to tell us how it should be done.
Die Frage.
Thank you very much for the question. We are seeing an increasing number of these cases coming into my office now. And here we are talking about people having to consent to something which is being done to their bodies. And when we're talking about mRNA substances, here there needs to be specific consent and authorization. And there are certain points that patients have to have explained to them before they can consent. Firstly, you have to explain to a patient what risk that is posed to them without this substance. So this would be different depending on your age. We do now have a lot of prevention measures for catching COVID. We've got treatment, and so statistically we can see that a lot of people don't need vaccinations. We've heard before that people talk about this reducing your risk, but it isn't much of a risk, and so that argument can be set aside. People, however, in order for their consent, need to be told that this substance was authorized according to a procedure where there weren't animal tests run, where there weren't human tests run, and so it's not even proven whether these substances work and whether they're safe. And this proof isn't something that anyone has seen thus far. Thirdly, you would have to explain to a patient that with these specific technologies, it's not clear yet where in their body these spike proteins are actually produced. How long they're produced for, what quantity they're produced in, and what quality they're produced in. Now, usually, the doctor can tell you what substance they're giving you and what quantity and you've got and how long it will last. You usually would have that information. Here, we're talking about people consenting to something that they can't consent to because they don't know what they're getting. They don't know what's going into their bodies. And so those are the most important points. But as a doctor nowadays, you also have to say, have you seen the statistics that we've got? Have you seen that there are huge numbers of side effects? And not just talking about or talking about relative numbers as well, because we've really seen those figures increasing in recent times. And if presented with all of this, any sensible person would say, no thanks, I'll solve the problem in a different way. I don't want an mRNA vaccine. And children, you have to protect them from risks. Children cannot consent. Children do not have the ability to protect themselves. It is their parents or the responsible adults that should be protecting them. So to answer your question, even if it is confirmed in writing that you have said yes to all of this information, only then have you given consent. So we will be very happy to deal with these legal cases, because in no case anywhere has this proper consent been provided. And there are going to be a lot of cases of this. Thank you.
Daran ergänzen vielleicht, ich meine, wie ist das denn abgelaufen?
So how did it work in Germany, for example? Those vaccination tunnels there where people were rushed through, and I don't think anybody consented to anything, and that's the whole issue. And it's what's irresponsible behavior on the part of the doctors, because, as said, the people should have been informed, and it's not just a matter of ticking a box, okay. No, that's not how it's supposed to work. They're supposed to be informed, and especially when you talk about a new vaccine technology. If I might just add to something, the problem is causality. You don't have to establish it to 100%, but it has to be likely or probable. There's specialized medical experts who can establish the link between vaccination and the consequence. But here it's a matter of causality. It's not a legal issue. Yes, thank you to all the speakers. This has been very impressive indeed. As I see it now, you just, in your last sentences, you said something that I was just going to ask you as a lawyer. When it comes to these sped up studies, there's a reversal of the burden of proof. That is to say, normal incident, any medical incident is relevant. So when it comes to incidents, they're reported to the pharma companies, and then you can track normally the cause back to the substance. But as you said, there's a reversal of the burden of proof, because then it's the patient, it's the vaccinated person that has to prove that the side effects are due to the vaccine. And you said causality, that's always tricky, especially if you don't have the data. And then secondly, actually, what about the legality of the sped up authorization process? I mean, I think there was a commission communication when it was the authorization of December 2019, where there was a communication that meant that this particular authorization process was specially designed, not to say dreamt up, for these COVID vaccines. So for you as a lawyer, isn't there a possibility of picking up on that and to question the legality of the authorization process they had recourse to? Yes, thank you very much for the question. I'm a Swiss lawyer, not an EU lawyer. Frau Dr. Renata Holzeisen from Italy, about a year ago, lodged a case with the aim of the authorization process being deemed to be null and void. But the case was unsuccessful because it was in relation to hospital staff that had to be vaccinated, so they did not have legal standing to lodge such a case. So the court says, no, you do not, it's not within the purview of every EU citizen to challenge these measures. And I've looked into this in Switzerland. And the question is, when it comes to this kind of authorization, how can you call it into question? And in Switzerland, we're at work. I can't go into the details, but my team and I have been working on this over the past 7 months. And in the coming days, we are going to be taking legal action, and we're going to publicize it so that hopefully interested politicians and other people in Europe will be in the know. So I think I've addressed the first question. Yes, there's the problem of the reversal of the burden of proof. I don't know if I'd go that far, but what we're talking about is body injury. You have an unknown substance being injected into you. That is bodily injury. And you have to consent to that. And the fact is that you should be given relevant information, in particular when it comes to the risk and benefit assessment, so that you can make your individual decision without any pressure. And if you have not obtained that information, then you did not give your advised consent. And then the question is the link between the injection of the substance and the side effects? Can that be established to a satisfactory level? I wouldn't call that a reversal of the burden of proof, but for those who weren't duly advised, they should take legal action against the doctors in question. Thank you.
Oui, merci. Je vais continuer en français.
Thank you. I'll continue in French. When we're talking about causality, that brings to mind a practical exercise that we can do and ask ourselves these questions. We've got other testimonies with us. Here it said, following a biannual Class A medical checkup, this pilot was allowed to work with no restriction. In May 2020, the COVID vaccine came in. He was asked to have an ECG and a heart examination. It showed that he had had a stroke. Now, the next day he had a meeting with people from the aeronautical industry medical service, and they declared him unfit for work. Because there was no pain and he was preparing for an internal competition, they said he must have had a silent infarct. Cardiac infarct. He still has a medical restriction against him, and he's unable to fly alone. Now, there's another testimony here. I don't want to give the name of the company because I probably shouldn't. This says they were flying to Paris Charles de Gaulle, extreme pain down the side of this pilot, extreme pain after receiving the second vaccine dose. Contacted the emergency services by the radio, saying that they needed to go to hospital. He was hospitalized when the plane was rerouted to Bucharest. And so, yes, there have been planes rerouted because of COVID side effects. Now, the reason we've brought all of these testimonies with us today is because we have to think about causality. When we're looking at the consequences of this, there are a couple of things that have to be taken into account. The proximity to the vaccine in terms of time, but also the quantity of reports that are being made. Because a judge has to form their own opinion given all of the testimonies and evidence that we give them. Now, what we're trying to do together is to have the courage to come forward with these testimonies. We've not got proper pharmacovigilance here, and that is one of the main problems we've got. We have to rely on the bravery of those people being willing to come forward and tell their stories. The longer we leave this to go on for, we're going to see more and more consequences. But unfortunately, I do think we need a lot of voices to be able to convince the judges here.
Ja, vielen Dank. Wir müssen uns lang.
Well, thank you very much. Well, we're coming to the end. I just have one question. We have time for one question.
EP, if you allow. Francesca.
Thank you very much. As we were talking about the problem of legitimacy of national authorization, I just wanted to inform you that I'm a lawyer too, and I personally made a criminal complaint in Italy for the fact that the Italian agency, medical agency that gave the authorization didn't put inside the authorization the term something that was in the EMA one, which is that this drug is subjected to medical prescription. So taking out the medical prescription was a way to deny to people to have the precise evaluation of their peculiar situation before being authorized to receive the vaccines. And this is a very big and severe violation of individual right to protection of health. So I suggest to you to consider this possibility even in your national, activity, legal activity, because if national agencies didn't include this medical prescription need in their authorization, it's a problem. It's either a false or in any case, a damage, an attempt to this fundamental right of citizens. And secondly, about the nexus, causality nexus, I made an open question to our Minister of Health, asking him why in Italy, if you have adverse effects after 14 days, from the last date of inoculation, the jab, you are automatically excluded by this nexus. And how does this comply with the need to monitor medium, long-term effects? So how can we assess the existence of medium-term or long-term effects if we automatically deny any connection between effects and the vaccines after just 14 days? That was a question which never received a reply, of course.
Thank you very much for this very good idea to incorporate into every criminal claim against this authorization also the fact that there was no prescription obligation provided together with this authorization. It's a very good idea. Thank you very much.
Je voudrais ajouter un point.
There's a point I'd like to add. Thinking about side effects which can happen after 14 days, the contracts that the EU drew up with Pfizer and the other manufacturers provide for these manufacturers to have responsibility for defective products. There is an EU directive for defective products, and today we still deem officially the COVID vaccine to be fit for use because it prevents transmission. But on that point, I think we need to finally get an admission that this isn't effective. And if it isn't effective, then it's a defective product. And regardless of whether the side effects are immediate or happen a long time after, then they're because of this defective product. That would be my point of view. But we're still coming up against this problem that people don't think this is a defective product, despite all of the side effects that it has. And the fact that it actually provides no protection.
Ja, vielen Dank.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end.
Having cut you off, but of course you can come up and ask your question. We will hang around long enough to answer your question. I'm very sorry about this. I hope it was informative for all of you. and there is a lot of things we have to chew on now. And I think as far as aviation is concerned, it is just a matter of time until the insurance companies will simply bail out and say, we are not going to take this risk anymore. And then this issue will be done with for once and for all. I guess this is how it will pan out in the end. So thank you so much for being here. And if you have any questions, just come up. We'll still be around. And it was good to have seen you here, and we will keep you posted what we will do next on this matter. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks.